Christopher Boone is a 15-year-old boy who lives in Swindon, England. One night, he discovers the dead body of Wellington, his neighbor's dog, lying in the garden. It's a quiet evening, and the street is dimly lit, with shadows from the trees dancing across the pavement. The stillness is broken by Christopher's realization that something is wrong. Wellington has been killed with a garden fork, and the sight disturbs him. Christopher, who has a unique way of seeing the world, doesn't react emotionally like others might. Instead, he becomes focused on solving the mystery of who killed the dog. Soon, Mrs. Shears, the owner of Wellington, appears. Her garden is simple, with flower beds lining the path, but her face is filled with confusion and shock. The police are called to the scene, and when they arrive, they begin to question Christopher. The officers' direct questions confuse Christopher, who struggles to interpret social cues. As the officer touches him, Christopher reacts by hitting him, which leads to his arrest. The scene shifts to the police station, where the small, brightly lit room feels sterile. Christopher's father arrives, angry but not at his son. He bails him out and takes him home. Back at home, Christopher's father warns him to stay out of other people's business and not to investigate the dog's death. Their house is modest, with familiar objects scattered around, but the tension between them is noticeable. Christopher listens to his father, but he doesn't fully understand why he must stop. To him, solving Wellington's murder is like solving a math problem, and math is one of the few things that makes sense to him. The next day at school, his teacher Siobhan, a supportive figure in his life, encourages him to write a book about his investigation. Christopher begins to record his findings in this book. Now Christopher takes it upon himself to investigate further. The streets of his neighborhood are quiet, lined with rows of houses and small gardens. He knocks on doors, asking questions about Wellington's death, though he finds it difficult to interact with strangers. Mrs. Alexander, an elderly woman who lives nearby, talks to him. Her house has an old, lived-in feel, with photos on the walls and tea brewing in the kitchen. During their conversation, Mrs. Alexander reveals something that Christopher did not expect. She tells him that his mother, who he believed had died, had an affair with Mr. Shears, Mrs. Shears' ex-husband. This revelation confuses Christopher. His father had told him his mother had died of a heart attack 2 years ago, but now he realizes that there's more to the story. Later, while searching for the notebook where he recorded his investigation, Christopher stumbles upon a hidden box in his father's room. The room is tidy, with everything in its place, but the discovery changes everything. Inside the box, Christopher finds letters addressed to him from his mother, dated after she was supposedly dead. The letters reveal that she is alive and living in London with Mr. Shears. Christopher feels betrayed by his father, who had lied to him about his mother's death. The house suddenly feels claustrophobic, as if the walls are closing in on Christopher. His father, realizing that Christopher has found the letters, confesses to something else. He was the one who killed Wellington in a moment of anger. This confession pushes Christopher further away from his father. Fearful for his own safety, Christopher decides to leave home. His mind races with thoughts, but the decision is clear. He must find his mother. In the early morning hours, the street outside is still, and Christopher sneaks out, taking with him his pet rat, Toby, and his father's bank card. Christopher embarks on a journey to London, a place he has never been to before. The journey feels overwhelming, with the noise and chaos of the train station. The station is crowded, with people rushing by, their footsteps echoing against the hard floors. The bright lights and loud announcements only add to Christopher's anxiety. He hides in a luggage compartment during the train ride, trying to avoid people. The journey is difficult, but eventually, Christopher reaches his mother's apartment. His mother is shocked to see him, standing there in the rain outside her apartment building. The apartment itself is small, with basic furniture and signs of everyday life scattered around. She is overjoyed to have her son back, but Mr. Shears, her partner, is less than pleased. The tension in the apartment is palpable, but Christopher stays with his mother, seeking the comfort and safety he needs after everything that has happened. Despite the difficulties, his mother decides to leave Mr. Shears and move back to Swindon with Christopher. Once back in Swindon, Christopher tries to adjust to his new life. His relationship with his father is strained, and they barely speak. The house, once a place of comfort, now feels heavy with unspoken words. But in an attempt to repair their bond, his father gives Christopher a puppy. The puppy is small, energetic, and full of life, a stark contrast to the sadness that had filled their home after Wellington's death. In the end, Christopher accomplishes what he set out to do. He solves the mystery of Wellington's death, reunites with his mother, and even passes his A-level math exam with top marks. The story ends on a hopeful note, with Christopher beginning to believe that he can achieve anything he sets his mind to, despite the challenges he faces. The streets of his neighborhood, once filled with questions and uncertainty, now feel familiar and safe again.